Okay, so now we are doing notes 0.3. So this is factoring by grouping. We are going to start with a review of multiplying polynomials. We've got two examples here, two binomials in each example. So we're going to review how to multiply them. Now I am going to do just the double distributing, the rainbows. I'm not going to do the box method. If you like to do the box method, you are more than welcome to do the box method. But for me, I'm doing the double distributing or the rainbow. So 5x squared times 5x, we are multiplying, so 5 times 5 is 25. And when we're multiplying, we are adding our exponents. So x squared times x is x to the third, because this x has an imaginary 1. Next up, 5x squared times 1. Anything times 1 is itself, so that's just 5x squared. Next up, 6 times 5x is 30x. And finally, 6 times 1 is 6. There are no like terms here because they all have different exponents, so that is your answer. And I'll do the same thing for number 2. 4x squared times 7x is 28x to the third. 4x squared times 4 is 16x squared. Negative 3 times 7x is negative 21x. And negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. Again, no like terms, so that is your final answer. So on notes 0.1, we learned how to factor out a GCF, or we relearned it because it's review from Algebra 1. But sometimes you will be given a question and they don't have a GCF that they all share. So we'll say sometimes all the terms won't share the same GCF. When there are 4 terms in a question that don't all share a GCF, you can factor by using a method called grouping. And just remember, factoring is just undistributing. So what I did up here in these examples, the review questions, we distributed and we got an answer. So what we're going to learn now is how to go from this answer and undistribute to end up back at the question. So grouping is when you find the GCF of 2 terms at a time in a problem that has 4 terms total. It could also have 6 terms or 8 terms. It's just usually the problems we see, they have 4 terms. If done correctly, you will end up with 2 sets of parentheses with the exact same thing inside. Now these notes that we're doing right now are the exact same notes I give you in Algebra 1 to learn how to do this for the first time, which is why you see this right here. This skill needs to be mastered because you'll be using it in all of the rest of your math classes. Now obviously you probably didn't use it in geometry, but geometry is special. But here we are in Algebra 2 using this skill again. We're just reviewing it now because we're going to need to use it all of the time in our future packets. So we have these steps here. So again, if you look at this question is what we started with, or is what we ended with in number 1. So the answer we got in number 1 is what we're starting with in number 3. So that means when I undistribute, I need my answer to number 3 to be what we started with in number 1. So we already know the answer to number 3 is going to be 5x squared plus 6 times 5x plus 1. So let's follow the steps in order to get that. Step 1 is to mark your 2 groups. So your first 2 terms are your first group, and your second 2 terms are your second group, as long as everything goes in order from highest exponent to lowest exponent. If it's not in order, you have to switch it around so that it goes in order, and then mark your 2 groups. Step 2, find the GCF of the first group and write it down. So I'm just focusing on group number 1. My GCF in group 1. Well, I need to find the biggest number that goes into 25 and 5. Well, that's 5. And then with your variables, you are picking the smallest exponent. So I have x to the third and x squared. 2 is my smallest exponent, so that means my GCF is 5x squared. Again, we're only looking at group 1. We are ignoring these 2 terms for now. Okay, so that was step 2. Step 3 says divide each term in the first group by the GCF and write the answers in parentheses next to your GCF. Don't forget the signs. Okay, so divide each term in group 1 by my GCF. So I'm dividing these both by 5x squared. So, and then I put my answer in parentheses. 25 divided by 5 is 5. X cubed divided by x squared is x to the first, or just x, plus 5x squared divided by 5x squared. These are the exact same thing. Anything divided by itself is 1. Okay, so that was step 3. Step 4 says, repeat steps 2 and 3 for the second group. So I have to do that exact same thing, but now I'm going to use group 2. So just a reminder, we're going to find the GCF and write it down, and then divide each term by the GCF. So now group 2, my GCF, the biggest number that goes into 30 and 6 is 6. Now I can't just put a 6 here. I need there to be a sign in front of it. So whatever sign is in between your two groups is what goes in front of the second GCF. So I just always bring that sign down. And then I pick my variables for the GCF. But the problem is that this term here does not have any letters. So that means my GCF cannot have any letters. So the GCF for this question is just 6. So that means I'm going to divide this group by 6 and put my answer in parentheses. 30x divided by 6 is 5x. And 6 divided by 6 is 1. So I have 5x plus 1. Now, we're not done yet. We're almost there. We have one more step. This up here said, if done correctly, you will end up with 2 sets of parentheses with the exact same thing inside. Well, look at this. We ended up with 2 sets of parentheses with the exact same thing inside. So we have to go to step 5. If your parentheses match, pull them out and write what is left over in a new set of parentheses. So my parentheses match. I'll even highlight them here. These match. So I'm going to pull it out. That means we're only writing it once. Okay. And then take whatever is left over and put it in a new set of parentheses. So what I have left over is this 5x squared plus 6. So that's what's going to go next. 5x squared plus 6. 5x squared was the GCF from group 1. 6 was the GCF from group 2. So altogether, you have this as your answer. The order of the parentheses does not matter, so you could also have 5x squared plus 6 and then the 5x plus 1. And these are the same thing. And you can check with the question at the top, number 1. Our answer from number 3 is the question from number 1, so we did it correctly. These are just opposites of each other. Distributing and factoring are opposites. That's why our answer for the first question is the question for number 3. And our answer from number 3 is the question from number 1, because they're opposites. Okay, so let's do that twice more on the front. So I'm going to split up my groups. I've got group 1 and group 2. Find the GCF of my first group. So the biggest number that goes into 4 and 12 is 4. And then I need to use my smallest exponent, so that's x squared. So my GCF for group 1 is 4x squared. So I will divide by that. So 4x cubed divided by 4x squared is just x, or 1x, or 1x to the first, if you want those imaginary ones. Minus 12 divided by 4 is 3. And the x squareds cancel out because it's the exact same thing divided by itself. So x squared divided by x squared is just a 1. And we don't need to put the 1 because I already have a 3 there. Okay, great. Group 1's done. Now I move on to group 2. Remember, you always have to bring the sign down. Whatever's in between the two groups, that sign gets brought down. So now I say, what's the biggest number that goes into 5 and 15? Well, that's a 5. And then I have to look at variables. Well, 15 doesn't have a variable, which means my GCF for group 2 doesn't have a variable either. So all I'm going to divide by is this negative 5. Because you brought that sign down, that negative down, that makes this GCF a negative. So I have to divide by negative 5. Which I have negative 5x divided by negative 5. That's just a positive x, or 1x to the first if you want. And then I have a positive 15 divided by a negative 5. 15 divided by negative 5 is negative 3. And look at that, our insides match again. I have 1x to the first minus 3, 1x to the first minus 3. So I pull that out. I'm just going to put x minus 3. And then my GCFs are my leftovers. Those go in the other parentheses. So 4x minus 5. Sorry, 4x squared minus 5. That's your answer. Try it again. Number 5. So I've got my two groups. The biggest number that goes into 49 and 35. Now, with factoring by grouping, we're lucky because there's only two terms. So I can use my calculator trick, which is math num 9. So if you go to your calculator, type in or click the button that says math, move over to where it says num at the top, and then click option 9, GCD. GCD and GCF are the same thing. You just have to type your numbers in with a comma in the middle. So what was it? 40, 49, and 35. The only thing that you have to do is not put any negatives. You cannot put any negatives when you're doing math num 9. So I have 49, comma, the comma is right above the 7, and then 35. Enter, and that will give you the GCF. So you don't have to think about it. But this only works for two terms, and they have to be positive. So 7 is my GCF. And then variables, I pick my smallest exponent, so that's x squared. So I'm going to divide by 7x squared. 49 divided by 7 is 7. X cubed divided by x squared is x. Minus 35 divided by 7 is 5. And my x squareds, they match, so those cancel. Bring down the sign in between your groups, so I'm bringing down the plus sign. And now I need the GCF for 56 and 40. 56 and 40. Again, two terms, so I can just use the fast method on my calculator. So that's math num 9, GCD. So that's 56, comma 40. And that's 8. So my GCF for that group is 8. So 8 there, and there is no variable in this GCF because the 40 doesn't have a variable. They all have to have the letter in order for the GCF to have the letter. In this case, it's just 8. So I'm going to divide by 8. 56x divided by 8 is 7x. Negative 40 divided by 8 is negative 5. And hey, will you look at that? They match again. 7x minus 5, 7x minus 5. So I pull that out, and then write what's left over in my other parentheses. So 7x squared plus 8. So you only write what matches one time. You pull it out. So I just write it once, and then my leftovers get put into the other part of my answer. If you did it the other way around, so if you said 7x squared plus 8 times 7x minus 5, that's the same thing. So those are both acceptable answers. Okay, we got 6 questions on the back. I'm just going to go through these. If I'm going too fast, you can always pause the video, rewind it, or you can slow the video down. But that is probably going to be annoying because then I'm going to be talking really, really slow. So let's mark our groups for number 6. The GCF of 24 and 15. I already know that this is 3, but I'm just going to show you again. Math num 9. 24, comma 15, enter, and it gives you 3. So I can divide these by 3x squared because of these two terms, x squared is the lower exponent. So I'm dividing by 3x squared. I get 8x to the first, if you would like to put that, but you do not have to, plus 15 divided by 3 is 5. And my x squareds match, so those go away. Now on to group 2. Always bring the sign in between them down. So it's a minus, which means the GCF of my second group is going to be a negative number. And 56 and 35 are my numbers. Again, only works with positive numbers, so we're not going to put those negatives. So I'm just going to do 56 comma 45. Enter. Did I mean 45? No, I meant 35. Sorry. 56 comma 35, and we get 7. So my GCF for 56 and 35 is 7. 35 doesn't have any letters, so my GCF is just this negative 7. So I'm going to divide my second group by the negative 7. Negative 56x divided by negative 7 is a positive 8x. And negative 35 divided by negative 7 is positive 5. And look at that. Again, they match. If these don't match, you've done something terribly wrong. So I pull that out, 8x plus 5. And I take my leftovers, the 3x minus 7, 3x squared minus 7, and those go in the other parentheses. That's your answer. Same thing, different problem. 24 and 64. So I'm going to go math num 9, 24 comma 64, and I get 8. So my GCF for group 1 is 8x squared (24 divided by 8 is 3, and x to the third divided by x squared is just x. Negative 64 divided by 8 is negative 8, and my x squareds cancel. Now I always bring down this sign, so I'm bringing down the minus. And 21 and 56, I already know that this is going to be a 3, or a 7, sorry. So I'm going math num 9, 21 comma 56, and we get 7. So that means I put minus 7 because I had to bring down this negative sign. No variable here because that doesn't have a variable, so I'm just dividing by a negative 7. So groups 2 GCF is negative 7. Negative 21x divided by negative 7 is a positive 3x, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. 56 divided by negative 7 is negative 8. And hey, look, they match. So I pull it out, 3x minus 8. And I'm left over with 8x squared minus 7, and that's your answer. Again, if you wrote it the other way, if you did 8x squared minus 7 and then 3x minus 8, it's the same thing. They're both correct. Four more questions. Number 8. I'm going to math num 9, 28 comma 16. Math num 9, 28 comma 16, and we get 4. So my GCF for this group is a 4x squared. When I divide by 4, I get 7x plus 16 divided by 4 is 4, and then the x squareds cancel. Now I'm going to bring down my minus sign. The GCF of 21 and 12 is 3. Since it's a minus sign that I had to bring down for group 2, it's a negative 3 that I'm dividing by. Negative 21x divided by negative 3 is positive 7x. And negative 12 divided by negative 3 is a positive 4. So I end up with matching parentheses, so I pull that out, 7x plus 4. And then a 4x squared minus 3. And that's our answer. Number 9, we've got 2 letters going on here. So just remember, the letters have to be in both terms in order for it to be in the GCF. So group 1, I've got 42 and 36. So math num 9, 42 comma 36, I get 6. So the 6 is going in my GCF. Now I'm looking at letters. They both have m, and they both have the imaginary 1 on the exponent, so I'm just going to put m in my GCF because they both have the exact same thing. Now this term has c and this term has d, but they don't have the opposite, so I cannot put c or d in the GCF because they don't both share it. So my GCF is just 6m. So 42 divided by 6 is 7. MC divided by m. These are the exact same, so those cancel out, and I'm left with just the c. Plus 36 divided by 6 is 6. My m's cancel here, leaving me with just d. And that was group 1. Group 2, don't forget to bring down that sign in the middle. So I'm bringing down a negative. The biggest number that goes into 7 and 6 is just a 1. And now looking at the variables, I've got n squared in both of them. So I can bring down n squared here. But they don't both have c or d, so that cannot be in my GCF. So I'm just going to be dividing by negative 1n squared. Negative 7 divided by negative 1 is positive 7. And n squared c divided by n squared. The n squareds cancel because they match, but I'm still left with c. And then negative 6 divided by negative 1 is positive 6. And the n squareds match again, so those cancel, and I'm left with just d. And again, these guys match, so I can pull it out, 7c plus 6d. And then what's left over, the 6m minus n squared, is my other parentheses. And there's your answer. Two more. If you want to pause the video and practice these on your own, you can. I highly recommend it. And then unpause the video when you've tried it and you have your answers to check with mine. So number 10, I've got two groups here. GCF of my first group is 3x squared. So I'm dividing by 3x squared. I am left with 4u plus 1v. Because 3 divided by 3 is 1, and I have to bring down v. Then I bring down my plus sign. The GCF of 28 and 7 is 7. And they both have a y in common, so my GCF is 7y. 28 divided by 7 is 4. The y's cancel, and I bring down the u. Plus 7 divided by 7 is 1. The y's cancel, and I bring down the v. So they match, therefore I did this right. So it is 4u plus v times 3x squared plus 7y. And that's our answer. Notice I did not put the 1 in front of the v because it's imaginary, it doesn't need to be there. And last question. First group, GCF, the biggest number that goes into 12 and 4 is 4. And they both share the letter B, so I will divide by 4b. 12 divided by 4 is 3. The b's cancel, I'm left with c. Minus 4 divided by 4 is 1. The b's cancel, I'm left with d. Then I bring down this minus sign. The GCF of 15 and 5 is 5. And they both have an x in common. So that means my GCF is negative 5x. When I divide by negative 5x, I get positive 3 because a negative 15 divided by negative 5 is positive 3. Then my x's cancel, leaving me with just c. And then positive 5 divided by negative 5 is negative 1. My x's cancel again, leaving me with just d. And finally, these match, so I pull it out, so it's 3c minus 1d, or just d, and then 4b minus 5x. And there you have it. That's factoring by grouping. So now you can do homework number 0.3.